I like to stay informed about certain things. I'm looking less at things due to the virus and this pandemic we find ourselves in, and more to the state of our planet and the state of our consumption as a human race, and just the models that we have in place that are just completely unsustainable. And I think that sort of thing is the type of stuff that I ingest more in terms of fear porn. I think we should all have a healthy dose of fear about our planet and make some
That's a good
changes.
point, dude. That's a really good point. It's like hard to distinguish between real data that maybe you should start considering when you're taking on like the individual responsibility required of a citizen
Hmm.
compared to just like clickbaited essentially content where
Yeah.
you're paying someone and it's like a form of entertainment, I guess. But dude, that's crazy. So if you're most afraid of one thing, would you say right now it's environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen already this summer the effects of heat waves worldwide, and I know the situation right now in Victoria, where I'm at, is on the island is pretty dire. We've had record heat on the island, and we're still logging old growth, right? So there's still companies that are like logging these giant trees, which are essentially sinks for carbon emissions and
Good
home to
point.
like many different, biodiverse, you know, situations.
We need those trees.
We
We
need
need them
those
sucking in
trees.
carbon.
I mean, also those trees are over 1,000 years old. It's like, can you cut any other trees? Like, there's a way to cut down trees and harvest lumber that's sustainable, right?
Yeah.
And what's
Like,
going on right
can't you have a
now?
farm, like a tree farm?
Of course, yeah, there's tree planting, there's tree farms, there's sustainable ways of logging, because logging, of course, in British Columbia is like a huge industry. And of course, I don't want to take jobs out of, you know, away from people, but there's a way to do it. Like, what's being done right now is essentially like, it's a quick and dirty, it feels like a quick and dirty cash grab with no real um afterthought about the repercussions of what's going to happen afterwards, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh well, it'll grow back. And if you look at the places that have been excavated, it's like, yeah, they might grow back, but not in our lifetime, not anytime soon, maybe in like 200, 300 years. But at that point, where are we going to be, right? So I don't know.
So I guess that was a debate in British Columbia recently. The debate being the government said they're going to try to stop old growth, or they were going to stop old growth chopping down of those old growth trees,
Hmm.
old growth forestry or whatever, the
Hmm.
forestry industry. And then it turns out that there were areas still being forested that had old growth in them
Hmm.
because of the bylaws or whatever, the permits or
Right.
bylaws put in place. And
Right.
then there was like a large outrage
Hmm.
around that, considering the government broke their word, although they didn't break it legally. The people who were
Yeah.
foresting were within their right. Permits given by the government, the people that give permits. So,
Hmm.
yeah, interesting debate. I agree, though. It's like
I
probably
just,
keep the nice
yeah.
trees.
Yeah. I just
Uh,
think it's like, it's hard to be on the side of the people that are like cutting down these ancient trees, where it's
so,
like,
the side of the people, I know that side. That side is listen, this is our business. We have these permits. These permits are put in place for a reason because the people that have these permits get to run their industry. This is our system. If you
mm-hmm,
don't like the system and you don't like what's produced by the system, don't pay with it. Don't engage with it with your dollars or take it up with the permit writers. Take it up with the government, right?
yeah,
So it's interesting. It's like, I get that perspective. If you can sell cocaine, let's say it was legal, and you set up
mm-hmm.
a business doing that, is it the person that decides to take advantage of that business, or is it the person that puts in place the parameters to set up that business? Who is liable? Maybe both on some level, but
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I yeah, I just look at the people that are like protesting and defending, and it seems like a moral cause to me. It seems like,
yeah,
it seems like these things like industry and business are not bigger than our livelihoods as human beings, if that makes sense, or our
yeah,
future, where it's like, I understand, like, yes, we need to, these people have jobs and they need to, like, they have the permits, like you said, but like, I feel as though as a species, we have to be like, look, we invented these concepts of business and these concepts of profit and things like that, where like we're literally excavating the things that we need to survive for this made up currency that we invented. Right? Like, I might be getting too existential on you, but I just feel as though like there's certain things that are bigger, and they're worth more to preserve.
yeah. I agree. Like, I think that's the protesters' outlook. But when I think about it myself, I'm like, maybe attack something that will actually produce results within the system. Often the protesters are against business or
Mm-hmm.
against some abstract thing that doesn't actually account for how it is that people make the decision to go about and engage in these activities. So if you're just going to protest against the business of forestry, that's like pretty undefined and it's unlikely to produce any type of real results. You have to go at the permit, because the permit is what produces the forestry,
Right. Okay.
right? So
Yeah.
so the cause is admirable, but the very abstract cause is not pragmatic in my opinion, and it would be better to pinpoint something and like frickin'
Right. Totally.
go at. Yeah.
I
And
think the trouble with this is that it's like, yes, you want to pinpoint exactly what to do, and people they've been, phoning Premier John Horgan day and night, being like, hey, why
yeah,
did you let this happen? Why is this going on? Like, why is this allowed to go on? And like, these treaties that happen with the traditional First Nations that are here are, maybe not the most just paperwork and things like that. And so I know people are trying to protest that aspect of it, but the fact is that while we're all like figuring out what the best way to do this is, they're in there and they're chopping trees
yeah,
down and they're on the ground. You know, and so of course you want time to organize yourself, but at that same time, while you're getting organized, trees are being cut down and you're losing the fight, right? So I get why people are setting up camp and putting themselves physically in the way of this machinery. It's like
yeah.
pretty hardcore. It's like,
And
wow.
dude, if you do that, respect to you. That's taking real action. If you like chain yourself to a tree, that's respectable behavior.
I think it's
Like
fucking
that's,
badass.
if you decide to do that, if you're tweeting about it, we know what you're doing. It's not very much.
Yeah, but I just still think it's like, I mean, I think I had a night, like, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months ago, where I like saw an Instagram video, and then suddenly I was like, wait a second, this is happening like in my fucking backyard. Like, this has been happening for what, like 8 months now or something like that. Like, it's been happening for a while. And so on one hand, it's like, yeah, the social media warrior isn't doing that much, but at the same time, it's like, I never would have known about any of this shit if it weren't for people being active on social media. So
That's a great point. Yeah, it does spread a cause and that it does gain momentum or it does
mhm,
like produce momentum for that cause.
mhm,
So there's this concept in political activism, let's say
mhm,
from the economic perspective, that's called NIMBYism, which is essentially this perspective of not in my backyard. If something's taking place in your backyard,
mhm,
like you're saying, like
mhm,
chopping down these old growth forests,
mhm,
you're very likely to be outraged about it.
mhm,
Now, often what happens is you're outraged about it and
mhm,
your government, let's say, permit or makes it unpermittable to like engage in forestry,
mhm,
just for this example.
Mm-hmm.
So you shut down that industry, the people lose their jobs, and you don't extract those resources. But
Mm-hmm.
those resources still have to be extracted because you there's gonna be there's a need for the product, right?
Right.
So paper, let's say, or whatever they're using
Right.
these trees for, or just building houses, whatever.
Right. There,
And
these
so
trees specifically are being shipped to like China or they're being shipped across seas. They're not even being processed in Canada.
yeah, they're just being shipped away. So if you shut that down,
Mm-hmm.
trees will still get cut down and they'll
Mm-hmm.
still get shipped. Now, maybe they'll be done in China, maybe it'll be in Japan, maybe it'll be
Mm-hmm.
somewhere where there's less environmental regulation, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But unless you actually reduce the production of a certain commodity,
Right.
there's going to be production of that commodity. Now, in Canada, it's interesting because there's a lot of this NIMBYism going on where
Mm-hmm.
we don't want mining in Canada. We don't want oil and gas extraction. We don't want forestry.
Mm-hmm.
All that stuff's going to take place. It's just going to take place elsewhere. Do we want Canadian regulation, Canadian business, and Canadian employment? Or would we rather just send it elsewhere and pretend it's not happening? Right. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
tough. Like for me, like in the Yukon, we talk about mining a lot. That's one of the
Mm-hmm.
main industries up there. And a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
protest mining. I'm almost like, listen, if we need these minerals, maybe Canadians should do it because we're going to care about the environment afterwards, at least more so than maybe a third world country. We're going to pay people what they're worth and maybe not pay them a couple bucks on the day. And
Mm-hmm.
we're going to build out our own like commodity infrastructure
Mm-hmm.
rather than just sending the business elsewhere.
Right.
And so it is a perspective, but on the other side of it, maybe, yeah, I don't know. What do you think of that?
I think that's like a very strong point. Although I think like we're talking about these infrastructures that exist that have existed with the same practices for many years, and I think maybe we could spend the extra whatever it is, money or extra time and energy to ensure that these structures of business and resource exploration are done so in a way that minimizes the impact, right? Like
Yeah,
when I think about it, it's like this is like, a over 1,000-year-old tree. Surely there are other trees, right?
and
I
little
mean,
ones,
just
whatever.
just cut down 1,000 little guys, or I
Yeah,
don't know, like figure it out,
yeah.
but it's just I don't know.
It's
I don't
so
know.
true,
I, I
but
I
it's
feel
yeah,
bad talking about this stuff because I am in no way an expert. I am
yeah,
a stand-up comedian. I fucking make jokes about dumb shit for hopefully a living,
totally.
right? So I'm in no way an expert, but I definitely consider myself on the side of the people that are fighting the fight against this stuff. So
Well, it's interesting because that's one of the, I guess it's like that stuff is important to be informed about because it informs your political leaning, which informs your vote, which presumably shifts to like your politics and
right, of
democracy
course.
moves itself in the right direction.
Hmm.
But then it's like almost no one really knows what they're talking about. And how
Yeah,
often are you voting on a premise that when you dig into it, you realize maybe you're
yeah,
very ill informed or naive or whatever?
yeah.
And I'm trying to be careful of that, although I'm no expert either. And like I don't
I
spend that
know.
much time on
I feel like I will read an article and I will have my mind swayed
it.
in one direction, and then I'll read an opposing article and then I'll get swayed in that direction. And I'm like, dude, I'm too fucking gullible to be on the internet.
Dude, have you